Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL Wire site that covers, of course, your Arizona Cardinals. And recording for this is our third show this week, but the second with Seth. This is the second of our preview shows this week. I've got Seth Cox from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, SB Nation's Arizona Cardinals site, my co-host, episode 624, and it is Cardinals-Patriots preview time. Seth and I talked earlier in the week about the Cardinals' chances, Kyler Murray, and their loss to the Seahawks. Jordy McElroy joined me in the last show as we previewed the Patriots game, and it's Seth and I will now do the same. How are you feeling about this game right now, especially with how things are going for the Patriots and how things are going for the Cardinals too?
Not great, Jess. Not great. I get it. The Cardinals, and we'll obviously give you our picks shortly and everything, but the Cardinals go into this game 6.5 point favorites. I'm kind of astounded by that. I get that the Patriots are 3 and whatever they are, 10 and or 11 or whatever it is. And so I get it from that perspective. But as you and I discussed briefly last show, the last 4 games, even though they're 1 and 3, and in fact, we can go back to the last 5 games, and even though they are 1 and 4 in those games, just since Drake May took over, and actually we can go back to their October 27th game against the New York Football Jets, right? Like, we can go back to then and look at what they've done, and even though they only have 2 wins in that time. They're 2 and 4, but they beat the Jets 25-22. They lost to the Titans in overtime 20-17. They throttled the Bears 19-3. They lost to the Rams 28-22. They lost to the Miami Dolphins and got blown out 34-15. And then they lost to the Indianapolis Colts 25-24. Just a 6.5 point spread for a team that has only lost 1 game in their last 6 by 6.5 it's kind of crazy, is it not?
It is a little bit, although I think part of it is looking at the Cardinals coming off the gauntlet of games that they did, that their offense is going to come around. And I guess, you also look at kind of what the Cardinals do well and what the Patriots haven't done well this season. I guess it kind of makes sense, but yeah, I was shocked to see it to be that large a spread.
6.5. And I know they do that for the hook and everything, but to say that they're a touchdown better at this stage, I feel like that's taking away from what they've done over the last 6 games, where they've been competitive in all but 1. That's basically saying, like, oh, we know that they're 3 and 10, but they're coming off a bye week. I know that doesn't mean anything for the Cardinals apparently, but for a lot of teams, that's a good thing. They've played close games. They've played competitive games. They look like a team that's finding their rhythm, and that may have something in Drake May. I'm not surprised by any means, and I don't want people to take it this way, that this team is favored. I am surprised, however, that they're favored this heavily in a game that, again, they haven't been bad the last 6 games. Again, they're not a good football team, but they are very similar to what the Cardinals were at this juncture last year, are they not?
Yeah, that's kind of the road that they're in right now. So let's look at the Patriots, the overall. Now, you look at the totality of the season, they are an atrocious offense. If you look across the board, they're 31st in yards and 31st in points, averaging, they're averaging exactly 17 points a game this season. And like, even as the thing, if you look at over the last 6 games, and I guess you kind of take it with a grain of salt, because who are their 2 wins against? 2 terrible teams. If you look at 4 of their last 6 games, heck, even 5 of their last, if you look at 5 of the last 7 games, they're going against teams that are kind of a mess. Jacksonville's a mess. The Jets are a mess. The Titans are a mess. The Bears are a mess. The Colts, I don't even get the Colts this year. They faced a Rams team that was still banged up, and then the Dolphins are kind of, the Dolphins are in a good place right now. They're 6-7, and it doesn't, like, 6-7 Cardinals feel like the sky is falling. 6-7 Dolphins feel like, yeah, we can magically do something. But I think maybe it's just that. Even if you look at the last 6 games where they're playing a little bit better, they've only scored they've scored 20 points or more 3 times in those 6 games. They got 25 against the Jets, 22 against the Rams in a loss, and 24 against the Colts. And they are turning it over at a high clip right now. They've had turnovers in each of their last 5 games for a total of, let me do some quick math here, 9 turnovers in their last 5 games. And you look at they did have a good offensive game against the Colts, 422 total yards and a turnover, and their defense was good that game. But you go look before that, you look at you go back to the yardage totals. You go back to, they were still Jacoby Brissett, 216, 299, 291, 295, 248 in that win over the Jets. That's wild. 295 in their overtime loss to the Titans, 328 against the Bears, and 382 against the Rams, with 269 against the Dolphins. And so there's optimism about this team, and that's what kind of we're talking about with Jordy McElroy. But there's really only 2 points of positivity on that Patriots offense. That would be the promise of Drake May and the play of their tight ends, because they don't get much from their wide receiver position. Their run game is bad, and their offensive line play is terrible.
Yeah, and that's, the reality of what this team is right now. I mean, you look at their game against the Colts and their defense, outside of a couple players, they're okay, right? I mean, you have to like what you see in Christian Gonzalez. He's a guy that is probably on the path to superstardom. They just re-signed Jabril Peppers. He's a nice player. And then outside of that, you look at it and you got some guys. I mean, Keon White's had a nice, I think this is his 2nd year in the league. He's had a pretty decent season this year. Nothing to like look at and be like, oh, this is this all pro level guy. But
but considering what the Cardinals got, 5 sacks would lead the Cardinals.
right, exactly. And so, like, you look at this team and what they have. They've got some decent players, but they haven't really gotten a lot out of guys that they wanted to. Right, Christian Barmore hasn't really lived up to the hype. They re-signed Dietrich Weiss for good money, and he's not playing a whole lot. I mean, that's a tough one. And so those players, those positions.
Oh, Juwan Bentley's been a huge disappointment too.
Yeah, and so these guys have been not great and not playing well, and that makes it tough when you have that, and that's kind of what you were building. The funniest part is, if you look at the Patriots, they're kind of the the mirror image of the Cardinals, right? Like the Cardinals built around a more veteran offense, and the Patriots built around what was supposed to be a more veteran defense, and both sides of the ball on that side are underperforming for what you would expect. Not necessarily bad. The Cardinals offense isn't quite as bad as the Patriots defense at times, but it's definitely in that range. And that's what the struggle is, because when you look at their offense, it's just, the reality is it's just devoid of talent, man. Drake May has looked really, really good. So I think that's, like you said, a positive. Their offensive line is borderline terrible. I don't even know 4 of the 5 starters, if I'm being completely honest.
You got Vidarian Lowe. You've got Vidarian Lowe at left tackle, a guy that's apparently just a guy. The interesting one is Cole Strange is just coming back, and he's listed at the back of the depth chart. He probably should be starting. But the only if Cole Strange is starting, I would know who he is.
Right.
Mike Onwenu is the only name that I even recognize.
Right, exactly. Because you're talking about Vidarian Lowe. You mentioned Layden Robinson, Ben Brown, and obviously Onwenu, and then DeMontre Jacobs. Like, these are guys I genuinely, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, I don't know who they are. And Layden Robinson's a 4th-round pick from this year. He's a guy they obviously didn't plan on starting. Ben Brown is a guy that was undrafted free agent out of Mississippi or out of Ole Miss. He's starting. He couldn't even get on with the Seahawks last year. Vidarian Lowe is a guy that was drafted in the 6th round by the Minnesota Vikings. Obviously, they saw something in him, but I don't think they were planning, like you said, on him being the every down guy, especially.
Hayden Wallace is coming. They designated him to return, and they hope he can. I think he's a 3rd rounder this year. They hope he can be something, but it didn't work out early on, and so that's what led to them giving up 43 sacks this season. Between Jacoby Brissett and Drake May have been sacked 43 times, and then in terms of their rush defense, it's bad. Their rush defense has been bad.
Well, and like you said, the bigger thing was that they were supposed to be decent on defense, because they had guys like Juwan Bentley. They had guys like Jelani Tavai. They picked up. They re-signed Kyle Duggar, and I know he's missed some games this year.
But he's been, like Jordy said, that he's been disappointing this year.
He has, and Keon White, again, he's been good. He's probably been their best front 7 defensive guy, but he's not living up to the hype. Dietrich Wise, again, he's only a pass rusher at this point. Like, these guys that they had hoped to get something from just aren't doing anything, and it's been really difficult. And you look at it, they've got veterans that are starting, David Godchow and Daniel Ekuli, and I know I'm butchering both those names. I apologize, but like, it's interesting to see them out of the Belichick system, right? Like, they were decent rotational players, serviceable starters. And even though Gerard Mayo is a Belichick disciple through and through, right? Like, it's not what they expected. And that's, again, why it's so interesting to me, because you kind of expected 31st in offensive performance, right? Like,
right.
You didn't really expect a whole lot from this team offensively, but for them to be 20th in scoring defense, their pass defense not bad, 14th in yards, but 20th in rush yards given up. They're 19th overall in yardage given up. Like, they don't create turnovers. Like what do you hang your hat on for a guy that, was supposed to be a defensive guy that was supposed to bring that defense back to, I don't want to say glory, because I don't think they were bad.
But they wanted that to develop first so that their quarterback could grow and not have to be Superman. And as a result, him having to be Superman, he turns the ball over. And it's usually the result of, the kind of in some cases, like some of Kyler's turnovers, like, hey, you're falling behind. He has to make a play late in the game, and it gets picked off because, it's been a rough year for them. And while the fans would like to see them win, it's also, and we remember the pain last year. They're like, do we really want them to win?
Right. You're looking at, you're looking at this and going, okay, well, if Drake May is the guy, and I'm assuming Gerard Mayo gets another year. I mean, I genuinely don't follow along close enough to what's going on in New England to have an idea. And for so long we didn't have to, right? Like it was always Belichick and Brady, and now Brady's on Fox and Belichick's at North Carolina. What is happening? But they've got the 3rd overall pick right now in the draft, and you look at this draft and you're talking about you could see them immediately addressing any position, right? And a guy like Travis Hunter could potentially address 2 positions, or they go get help for Drake May along the offensive side of the ball. There's they have a lot of options. And so, like you said, like it's not the worst thing in the world to finish with the top 3 pick. And depending on, and again, we don't expect either of these teams to win another game in Las Vegas or New York, but you could be looking at a situation where you have a chance to pick 1st overall if Las Vegas or New York win one of their last 4 games. And I know people go, oh, that's silly to look at any win as meaningless when you're young, but there are meaningless wins in the grand scheme of things, because at the end of the day, if you win a game and you end up, now picking, you would pick 9th or 8th in the draft, 8th in the draft, and then your best option is a good player, right? But like you're not getting that guy that's going to be a game changer. It's very difficult to justify for 1 win, because you look at the rest of their schedule, it doesn't feel like they're going to beat Buffalo, right?
No, twice.
Twice. They got to play Buffalo. Well,
maybe week 18.
Yeah, but Buffalo lost again, so now Buffalo's fighting for the 2 seed.
Yeah.
Like, if anything, you're like, hey, thanks, Buffalo, for making your job or making our game more important, because now, and so the only, the winnable games, and I use that term loosely, were the Cardinals and the Chargers, right? You got the Cardinals, but that's an away game. It's a West Coast game. It's a late start game for them. And then that Chargers game could be interesting, could be tricky. But, I mean, this is not a team, even though we've just spent the last, 15 minutes crapping on them. This is not a team that you look at and you go, oh, yeah, Cardinals by 6.5, right? Like you look at this and you go,
I think that says far more about what we feel about the Cardinals more than anything right now.
Well, yeah, right now, but that's why it's so odd to see it, because like I said, the last 6 games, they have 1 game where they've lost by more than 6.5.
Yeah.
And in those games, I mean, again, the Titans are terrible, but they played the Rams within 6 and they played the Colts within 1. And I know those teams aren't good by any means. And of course, losing to the Titans by 3 is not impressive at all. But you look at those things and you go, oh, okay, this team isn't terrible in terms of competing. They're just not good enough yet to win those games. And that's, again, we were there last year with the Cardinals, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh,
But it's wild. We say 6.5. Now it's shifted a little bit on BetMGM to 6, but if you're trying to get even money on either side, the spread isn't far enough, because on BetMGM, 73% of the handle is on the Cardinals to cover. And then if you go to the money line, it's 96%.
Yeah, and the money line's not worth taking unless you're, putting this at the end of a parlay where you're like, I just want to juice this just a touch. But let's be honest, we wouldn't do that with the way the Cardinals have played this year.
Oh, geez, no, definitely not. They do have basically their offense is ground and pound a little bit with Ramondre Stevenson, who's a solid back. But
I was going to say, isn't that kind of what worries you though too? Because you go, oh, geez, like if they get on track, and again, like you said, the offensive line, and so that's the hard part, is that they rely so heavily on the ground game with a terrible offensive line.
Yeah, he's only averaging 3.7 yards, but he's a workhorse back, but isn't particularly flashy. They have nearly 1,000 yards from their two tight ends in Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper. They combine for 89 catches for 947 yards. Hunter Henry with 58 catches, 610 yards, and he's the only guy that's over 500 yards at this point. Demario Douglas, 52 catches for 497, but he's not one of their starting receivers, and he's got some dropsies problems. They're not getting much from the receivers at all.
Well, and you kind of mentioned it, and Jalen Polk's, I think, was I just want to double check when that second one was before I say this. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so Jalen Polk, I mean, he's their second leading touchdown receiver this season and third leading touchdown scorer this season, because when you look at it, Ramondre Stevenson has 6. Austin Hooper has 3, and the next guy is Jalen Polk with 2. And by the way, sorry, Stevenson has 7 total.
He's got 1 receiver. He's 1 touchdown catch. He's got more touchdown catches than Trey McBride.
Right. But again, you mentioned it, like Jalen Polk has 12 catches for 87 yards. So every 6 catch is a touchdown for Jalen Polk. It's just an interesting thing, because like you said, it's not that May is playing poorly per se, but it's very inefficient football despite a high-ish completion percentage, right? And he's really outplayed Jacoby Brissett. I mean, you look at what Jacoby Brissett did in his 5 starts, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception in 5 games is,
oh my gosh,
wild to see. But they have a bunch of guys. You mentioned Demario Douglas, that, I mean, they're just kind of guys that catch the football and don't really make plays with it. And some of that's their game, some of that's the route, some of that's their offense. And so it's tough, man, because you have a team that, like you said, doesn't run the football particularly well, 3.7 yards per carry. And I mean, quite frankly, Antonio Gibson's been a much more efficient running back at 4.7 yards per carry, and he has 79 carries on the season. Drake May, obviously he doesn't run the ball a ton, but on 38 carries has 345 yards rushing. Like, his legs are a weapon. And so those are what to watch. And then on the flip side, we talked about the defense a little bit. Keon White's he's not bad. I mean, I don't want to take anything away from him. He's not bad. Dietrich Weiss has turned into kind of a one-trick, pass rush specialist. And you look at it, and something, I'm not. Everybody knows, they've listened to the show long enough. I'm not huge on quarterback hits being as important as sacks, but it's always interesting when a guy basically is a 1-for-1, right? Like when his sacks and quarterback hits numbers are the same.
Because usually sacks are hits. Every once in a while, they're not.
Right.
For example, Dennis Gardeck's last sack last season when Justin Fields ran out of bounds, that counted as a sack, but it didn't count as a hit.
Right.
He didn't hit him.
And so you look at that and you go, oh, this is not great, because he has 5 sacks, but he has 7 quarterback hits.
Yeah.
So you're like, oh, this dude doesn't. And Josh Uche, remember, everybody wanted the Cardinals to trade for Josh Uche at the trade deadline, right?
2 sacks.
Yeah, he had two sacks before getting traded to Kansas City, and now he's in Kansas City. And is he hurt? Obviously he's not there anymore, so it doesn't matter. But he's not even playing in the last 2 games for Kansas City. So like, that's the thing, is like, this team, and again, I'm selling everybody on why you should take the Cardinals on the money line, take the Cardinals -6.5, because I'm downplaying this team, but they haven't been good.
No.
They just flat out haven't. But they do things well enough that it makes you uncomfortable.
Well, especially because like they've had the extra rest. The Cardinals, this could be one of those games where it buries the Cardinal season. Now, there are, like I detailed on Cards Wire, that the Cardinals, technically, there is still a shot for them to lose either to the Panthers or the Patriots and win the division. If they finish 9-8, but beat both the 49ers and Rams, and the Rams beat Seattle to end the season, and they end up all 3 teams 9-8, then the Cardinals win the division. But yeah, that's so. But I know we're feeling a little nervous about this game. I'm not nearly as nervous. But coming up next on the Rise This Year podcast, Best of Cardinals Talk of the Web, let's look at the matchups, the keys to this game. The Cardinals need to get right. They need to get back to 500. They need to get back to their ways, and they need help. That's coming next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise This Year podcast, Best of Cardinals Talk of the Web. Time to talk about keys to the game, important matchups. I think we're going to go back to basics, and when it comes to this game, they need to throw the Patriots don't stop the run well. Run the football. Start with that. Run the football and cause problems for Drake May, because they are a bad blocking team, and the Cardinals, against bad tackles and a bad offensive line, they can get pressure. They've been mostly getting pressure from the interior, or when you blitz Mac Wilson. But I think this is a game where you can kind of make it boring, run the football, give a heavy dose of James Conner and Trey Benson. Honestly, this is a game where you can play the running back and tight end offense and methodically win this game.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is you want to force this team to try to be explosive, and if you can get a 14-0 type of lead in this game where you score in the red zone twice early, not just once and then turn the ball over a lot, but twice, you have a good chance of forcing that. And like I said, again, don't want to jinx it, but 23rd in turnovers forced. They forced 11 turnovers all year, man. Like, this is not a team that forces turnovers. They're last in yardage on the season. We talked about it, or second to last. Sorry, and they're second to last in points for on the season. So if you put the pressure on the offense, that ideally should be a positive. Now, again, I'm not going to say, oh, if they do that, they're going to win this game. But ideally, that's what you want to do to win this game, right? You want to get ahead 14-0, and then kind of coast from there and into something like you saw with the Dolphins, right? 34-15.
Yeah,
But
because they opponents run the ball a lot against the Patriots, and while the Patriots are pretty okay in terms of yards per attempt, that's because they're 10th in the league in the yards per attempt allowed at 4.3, but they've opponents have run the ball 377 times. That's what they're in the top
7. Yeah.
7 in terms of, and that's because they're losing, and teams can just play. Grind it out. They can play slow down. And, that's what hurts. That ultimately, that's what ends up hurting some of the Cardinals carries. When you give the ball and turn the game over to DJ Dallas and Amari DiMercato late in the game, it's kind of how that ends up happening. Run the football. They can't turn the ball over. You can't give any life. But matchups. What are the matchups that you're watching? Come on, this is if Darren Lowe is as bad as Jordy McElroy says. Give me some Zaven Collins this week. Let's see what he can do.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. My favorite one, and I don't know how much 1-for-1 it will be, but my favorite one is Marvin Harrison Jr. and Christian Gonzalez, right?
Yes.
Like let's see what Marvin Harrison does against one of the alphas in the NFL. How does that work? And then I think the other matchup offensively is who's going to stop Trey McBride. I know Jelani Tavai was supposed to be a guy like that, and I think if I remember right, and my memory's fuzzy, so don't hold me to this, but I think he was in Detroit before this, if I remember right. I'm double checking my math here. Yeah, he was in Detroit and then didn't really play well, and then went to New England and kind of had a resurgence, right? Like, he was a second round pick, only lasted 2 years in Detroit, went to New England, first year wasn't great, and then kind of had a resurgence, and he was a resurgence as a coverage guy, which is why Detroit got him to begin with. And he was the best coverage linebacker in the NFL after Fred Warner probably last year. I mean, if you believe in the PFF grades, 82.7 coverage grade. He was fantastic. This year, Jess, he has a 43 coverage grade.
Oh my gosh. That's
so like
atrocious.
Yeah. So like what happened to Jelani Tavai is something that we'll have to watch, to be studied. And like you mentioned, the other one, and I know he's been kind of banged up this year and dealt with some things, but like Jabril Peppers, he hasn't been the same guy. He came back last week and was terrible. I mean, there's no other way to put it. He was bad. I mean, he gave up. He wasn't helpful in the game in a game that they had a chance to win. And so we'll see, another week back. He is a game changer. Like, he is a fantastic defensive player, but he was just so bad last week. We'll see how he matches up, because those guys are going to have to be on Trey McBride, right? Like, those are the guys that they're going to get Trey.
Yeah.
And I just don't see either of those guys really being able to match up with Trey.
Yeah, let's be honest. Anyone guarding Trey, it's like he puts up numbers against pretty much everyone. Fred Warner, it doesn't matter. He is productive. But yeah, Harrison against Gonzalez will be fun to see if we can do that. Well, and secondarily, Ben Jones has played a lot, but let me see. I didn't see what his status was on the injury report today, because he was ill. Did not participate. Apparently, he was back at practice. But yeah, so he was back at practice. Michael Wilson against Marcus Jones should be a fun matchup, and yeah, I'm interested in seeing that, and just in general, like the offense, Arizona's offense needs to, and I feel in some ways things should feel easier because of this defense. They faced Seattle's defense, which is very good. They faced Minnesota's defense, which is good, and they were good against it. But it should feel more like hot knife and soft butter, right? It should have felt like that, like the way the Cardinals play offensively. It should look like that, and they shouldn't. as long as they stop the holding penalties.
Well, that's what I was going to say. That's the last one is Keon White versus Paris Johnson Jr. because, Keon typically rushes from that right side. So the defensive right.
He's got length. That guy's got length. I remember coming out of college. He was one of the guys I wanted the Cardinals to look at. I think he was older.
And he's a lot like Darius Robinson in terms of style of play and things of that nature. So, Paris is, you covered it last week. This last 3-game stretch has been the worst of his career. They're going to need him to not suck if they want to have a chance this week.
Yes. Coming up next on the Rise of Secret podcast, the best of our Cardinals talk. Let's move on and pick on. This is our picks, predictions, and props. That segment is coming up next on Rise of Secret. We're back on the Rise of Secret podcast, the best of our Cardinals talk on the web. Time to make our picks, predictions, and props. Jordy went crazy and said that the Patriots will win 34-30. I'm not feeling it. I've got the Cardinals winning this one pretty. It'll be not an exciting game. Like, it won't make you feel great because they don't score a ton of points. But I think I've got them winning this game 27-16, where they will force the Patriots to kick field goals, and the Cardinals will do enough. They'll be pretty methodical. But 27 points means, assuming there's no missed extra points, there's 5 scoring drives, 3 touchdowns, and that's the sort of performance that we want. I want something methodical. I want something. Now, if they could put up 45 points, that'd be great. But they need to score touchdowns. They need to score touchdowns and get up to the 50-60% clip in the red zone for touchdowns in this game rather than struggling. But I think this is going to feel much easier, that after playing the teams the Cardinals have played, that it will go more or less feeling like those games like against the Jets and the Bears, without necessarily the blowout feel, but in terms of in control of the game.
Right. And this will be an interesting one. I've got it real close to what you have. I have it 27-17. Cardinals win this one. So as much as we lamented it, we both have them covering. We both have the under. Again, I don't recommend betting the Cardinals cover the spread. I don't. Because even at 6.5, where it's still out on FanDuel, you're playing with fire, man. Like, I just don't like that. I don't like what they've been able to do and things like that. So I think I think the
Cardinals have pressure on them. We haven't seen the first time in the last season and a half when we felt the Cardinals had any pressure. They've been folding like cardboard, man. And so they are now they're in another pressure spot here to get back in it. Can they recover and bounce back? And I think we badly need Kyler to have one of those good Kyler games, because with 5 turnovers in the last games, it's now that the chirping is coming. Like, everything was going well for a while, and everyone's back to Kyler's a bum. We need to move on from him. Like, guys, really, who would be better?
Yeah. And so that's an interesting one. And so you've got it's interesting because all of the props aren't out yet, and that's because New England's hurting. I mean, they're hurting.
I do have some on BetMGM for I love the rushing props, the over under for James Conner 72.5. Take that. And even if you want to go rushing and receiving yards, although I think you're going to get better. You're going to get better bets on just the rushing yards, 72.5. And then if you take the alternate up to 100 plus, it's going to be plus 195. I think that one's going to be a fairly easy play. If you do rushing plus receiving yards, like the total there that they said is 97.5. So you have to make any money at all, you'd have to go up on the alternate to 125 plus to make it plus 175. I'm torn which one would you do? Would you do the latter on the rush or the rushing and receiving?
I do the rush. I agree with you on that. And the reason I'm with you, Jess, is because this is absurd. And we talk about these all the time. Connor's an anytime touchdown scores minus 210, which is terrible. Don't take it. It's not worth it. But Jess, he's plus 290 to score 2 touchdowns, which is
Oh,
literally absurd to even like see it that like I've never seen numbers that low for 2 touchdowns. I've never seen a guy under plus 500 to score 2 touchdowns in a game. That's a wild.
This is a James Conner's going to eat game.
Yeah,
which
so
means that I don't have any touchdown. I don't have any touchdown props yet. But you know what might be what a good one would be Trey McBride. I'm not Trey McBride, but Trey Benson.
Yeah, so Trey Benson anytime is plus 340. The
Ooh.
same as Amari DiMercato. So you're kind of on the right track, right? Like this is a game where you could potentially see a guy that doesn't typically get it because the Cardinals are blowing them out. Like that's kind of what these odds are saying to everybody. An interesting one because it's been so talked about, and so I don't typically like to do this, but an interesting one to look at to just keep an eye on is Trey McBride, first touchdown score of the game. That's plus 950. Those aren't great odds. I usually like to be over. I like to be plus 1,000 or more in those situations. So if and when BetMGM or DraftKings or any of the other ones have their first touchdown scores, see if that's a little better. But it's been such a conversation that it seems like one of those that we could see it happening, right? And instead of it continuing to kind of linger and play out that way. So it'll be interesting for that. The other one that I really like is Kyler's prop of over 1.5 touchdowns. It's minus 118. So I know
minus
that
105. Minus 105 on BetMGM right now.
Yeah, so I would go with BetMGM on that one. Kyler over 21.5 completions. I would actually take that as well. I think this is going to be a game where he's like 22 of 27, type. and so I like the over 21.5. I would take that. That's minus 110. I don't know if they do that on BetMGM, but I do like that.
You get you can get it at 20.5 on BetMGM for minus 115.
Even better. So yeah, both those are better on BetMGM. Go do it. 100%. I really like that this week because, as just said, like this is a game where ideally they should eat. Now we're gonna be all over this, and it's gonna be a slop fest, but the hope is that it's not, and that we're able to see some impressive games. So that's one of the things, and then. One again, there's not a ton of props available just because of the New England situation. They're really kind of holding back things right now until they get more. But one of the other things, Jess and I both have the under. But if you think that the Cardinals are going to put up points, and this is going to be a game where they put up points in this situation and can potentially score quite a bit, the point total for the Cardinals is 26.5. If you think, and we both have them at 27, so we both have them over that. So if you can get, once the alt plays come out, and I don't see them now, I'm trying to see if they have anything else. No, they don't have it yet. But if you think that they're going to get to that, I would potentially go and bet that, because if you think it's over 30, you're probably going to get that when it comes out right around plus 140-ish, which is, if that's what you think is going to happen, I would take that. The one that you might want, and we both have it 27, so this isn't a great bet, but what's available right now, over 3.5 touchdowns is plus 150. So if you think it's 28, 35 type of thing, 34, as you mentioned, 4 touchdowns and 2 field goals, that's a good bet, because that's a plus money bet right now. So I think the longer this goes and the more people that end up out for the Patriots, the numbers are going to shift a little more.
Yeah, it's interesting on BetMGM is that they don't have any regular receiving props for Trey McBride. However, and I love this, alternate receiving yards at 75 plus is plus 105. That feels like easy money, and you can jump it up to 100 for plus 300.
Yeah, and
like the 75 plus. That's really easy. That seems super easy to get.
Yeah, and I think that's a great call, Jess.
Any other things worth looking at the moment? Oh, I mean, to say players, we have kick. Field goals made. Joey Sly. Okay. Joey Sly over 1.5 field goals is plus 125.
Yeah, I
think that's easy money. So yeah, because they suck in the red zone.
Yep.
They suck in the red zone. So take that plus money. Anything else of note to look at for you?
Nope, that's it. I think this is going to be, a semi get right game, like this team isn't that terrible game. We'll see what bad or terrible looks like and be like, okay, it could be worse. Like but I mean, we've been disappointed too in the last couple of weeks. So I don't want anybody to think that we're like talking down. No, we're just like, okay, it's not as bad as it seems because we know it could be much, much worse, but it's still bad.
Yeah. And with that, we will wrap up this edition of the Rise Up C-Red podcast, Best of Cardinals Talk on the web. This is episode 624. This is show 3 of this week. We'll be back next week to talk about the Cardinals-Patriots game. Hopefully it's a win to get back to 7-7. If things go well, the Cardinals got some help in terms of wins and losses in the division. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. This is the Rise Up C-Red podcast. Thanks for listening as always. We'll be back again soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up C-Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise Up Red C, be Red C-Red, and of course, Rise Up C-Red.